Chuckleinik. I'm a reenactor. That means I put on funny clothes and try to recreate history. And for 36 years in the classroom, that's exactly what I did. Trying to breathe life into a subject that many of my students considered to be as dead as the people we were studying. But I've also been involved in reenactment organizations longer than that. And that means I have an entire room at home full of clothing that doesn't even remotely belong to this century. And I have a passion for bringing the past to life and a desire to preserve landmarks which tend to go away. So what I'm on currently is a very pretentious sounding mission Odyssey, which means I intend to visit each of the Alta California missions, the Asistencias. Those are the spin-off missions that were intended to grow up to become full missions in their own right. The Estancias, as I've now added that, those would be the ranch stations that I could find information on and find locations for. Then those were supposed to support the missions as well. And the presidios, the fortifications where soldiers were assigned to protect groups of missions. So currently, I'm on the road and looking to go to the old Mission Dam in San Diego. And that's going to have people confused because that doesn't seem to fit any of those previous categories. But there's a purpose behind this. I hope you stick with me and find out what it is. Quick review. After a couple of rough starts, Father Serra established the first of the Alta California missions, Mission San Diego de Alcalá, amongst the Kumeyaay, and the mission began to grow. But there's a bit of difficulty in converting the Kumeyaay to the Spanish way of life. So what I have to do now is I have to step out of the role of reenactor and take off my reenactor's hat and become an anthropologist and archaeologist again. So, this dam is a fundamental clash of cultures. It's the symbol of this clash of cultures. Because the way I was taught in school, the Spanish came in and they taught agriculture to the Native Californians, because clearly the Native Californians didn't know how to do this and therefore were culturally inferior. And that always bothered me because I know what it's like coming from a culture that was suppressed by other cultures. The Native Californians didn't practice agriculture that much because it really wasn't necessary. As a matter of fact, it became more work than it was worth. So they lived by hunting and gathering largely. And there are isolated instances of very small levels of agriculture being practiced, for instance, among the Kumeyaay, but it tended to be more that I've seen, from my research, it tended to be more around the tribes around the Colorado River. But otherwise, they really weren't into the agriculture thing because hunting and gathering worked for them. And one of the best examples that you could give, at least the one that stuck with me, was the Kuwaia. So here's what the Kuwaia did. They lived they still live in the area around Palm Springs. And what they would do is during the summer, they would go up the mountain and they would gather their food and they would hunt. And some of the things that they ate really just didn't appeal to me. But then I don't have room to talk because I eat hot dogs. Okay? And when winter would come, they moved down the mountain into the flatlands where they continued hunting and gathering. And it worked for them. And it was a sustainable population. So here is this fundamental clash of cultures and ideas. Just how to live. And part of what's happening is the Spanish are coming in and they have no concept of people choosing to live another way. Clearly, if you're a hunter-gatherer, you must be primitive, You must be banging the rocks together. And also, with the Spanish coming into Alta California, they're doing this partially through imperialism. They want to take over territory. And in taking over territory, that means the resources of the area they're taking over now belongs to Spain. So here are the Spanish. Foolish Indians, you don't know how to farm. We'll teach you. The problem is, back to that resources thing, the Spanish need more resources. In this case, they want more food because that food is also being shipped out. And they are doing whatever they can to increase the yield. Well, this isn't working for them because this is an arid climate. Farming is difficult. Raising cattle is difficult. And farming wasn't really the best option for a while on the lands, the 55,000 acres of Mission San Diego. It was a bit too arid, so a lot of what the mission relied on doing was on raising cattle and raising sheep, and that was more of the money maker. That was the set of resources they chose to invest in because it was simply too arid. But eventually, the Spanish are going to get their crops planted. They're going to get trees planted. They really love planting olive trees in this area, apparently. And things are going okay. And by the way, the population's going up. And that's not really something that was happening before the Spanish arrived. The Kumeyaay lived in balance with nature, so the population is remaining pretty constant. The Spanish have come along and they've decided they need to have more is better. Most of the missions raised cattle. Each had its own distinctive brand. Mission San Diego, in fact, had 2 brands. They also planted trees and planted other crops. And when I was an anthropology and archaeology student, I was assigned a book which changed my life. It was called Small is Beautiful. And it was the idea in that book of small sustainable societies, small sustainable economies. That's exactly the opposite of what the Spanish are doing. Because the Spanish, like other imperialist societies, are looking at more is better. So, more people, that shows you're more successful. More food, well, that's going to result in more people. More is better. So there's a fundamental conflict here between what Native Californians felt and what the Spanish and later the Mexican government or cultures or societies are going to feel. So the mission San Diego de Alcalá is successful, but it could be more so. Okay? And there were times where the Spanish had considered abandoning it, which, when you start taking a look at how many other missions were established around by 1800, there were 18 missions established. The Spanish were thinking maybe we ought to cut our losses. But still they managed to hang on, still they produced food. And then there's a 2-year-long drought that ends in 1802. And that's when the Spanish decide, we have to do something. We need to find a more sustainable water source. So when you have this 2-year drought that decimates the mission lands, the Spanish are realizing, we need a more sustainable water source. And they looked through the 55,000 acres of land, and they looked into the hills, and it was pretty much written by a lot of the Padres going, okay, from what modern day Poway to Claremont, useless. Except for this one spot they thought they could build a dam at. And that was 6 miles away from the mission. So in 1803, the year after the drought ended, the Spanish came up here about 6 miles away from the mission. This is where they decided to build the dam. They decided around 1803. It's probably not going to get started under construction until 1809. And it'll take, let's see, there was a report in 1814 that said that the flume had only been extended like 3.5 miles. Well, remember, the mission is 6 miles away. Remember who is doing the labor. You'll see the Padres and the Kumeyaay work together. Well, the Padres directed traffic and told the Kumeyaay where to put stuff. But the Kumeyaay, remember, this was not something they needed, but the Spanish needed it, and since the economy was going to change for the area, the Kumeyaay are being taken along for the ride. Remember, all of these materials would have had to have been brought in by hand, made by hand, shaped, put in place by hand. You got to use your imagination to see what this would have looked like back then and how it would have worked. Because obviously this is shorter and parts of it have been knocked away. That 12-foot opening in there, that would have been blocked with a wooden gate that would have been raised or lowered to raise or lower the level of the water. The missionaries later added a second of 2 walls forming a V shape which functioned as a buttress that reinforced the dam. Water was released through gates and spillways to operate a sawmill and for irrigation at the mission 6 miles downstream, and the way the Padres got the water into the mission was through means of a noria or a water wheel. But so much water was lost in the river sands and the soil. This required the construction of a zanja or aqueduct or flume that was lined with tiles and rested on cobblestones and cement. Gravity did the work. The water fed through a pipe that was made of tile and only 3.5 inches in diameter at the dam, and traveled the 6 miles to the mission. Nothing's left of the flume. I think I found my spot. Huge engineering project continued to exist from 1817 until about 1831. Constant flooding caused the dam and the flume to fall into disrepair. Well, then secularization happened in 1834 to the California missions, and that's going to be causing even less concern about keeping things running. By 1867, the dam and aqueduct were in ruins. In 1874, residents of the Mission Valley restored the dam and again put it to use for a time. It was washed away in another flood in 1916 when the San Diego River flowed as high as 12 feet above the top of the dam. In the 1930s, it was partially repaired again. So, 3 assistencias down, 1 presidio, 1 mission accomplished, and a dam. I hope you realize why I actually gave a thought about filming at the dam and telling its story. So, on towards Mission San Luis Rey de Francia, which is, checking my cheat sheet, about 41 miles, 45 miles, because I'm going to swing by Mission San Diego and actually do the Camino Real. So I hope you'll stick with me on my adventures.